Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, a live show number 318. I am your host and moderator for today, for those who wish to join us live at any particular chance, with the chance to discuss our topic today, which, as we said with our new formatting, will be a single topic per conversation, hour long today, as we normally do, and that is earned versus paid media. As with all headlines, they are, of course, a bit of a teaser ad, if it were. The art of creating headlines in itself is an art, hence the word art, whatever. The full term of it really is paid versus earned versus owned media ever really been a strategy? Or is it just a means of understanding the methodology associated with creating a strategy? So I propose that in the sense that we learn things very similar to when we were children. We had basic understanding of things, then we progressed to interpreting what we learned, and then from there we grew to experiencing the things that we learned from. It's much like a language. First you learn words, then you learn terms, then you learn how to read, and then you learn how to dialogue. And then I've always felt that the true knowledge of another language, which I do not possess, is the ability to dialogue it in such a way that you can create the nuances, jokes, as it were. We fully fluently understand the language to the point that you can understand its entendres and make communication at a level that shows mastery of the craft. I also relate it to much like my martial arts experiences, where the history of learning a martial art is learning the styles and forms, the old wax on, wax off, as it were. You're learning the motions, you're learning the katas, the forms to show and exercise the motions so they become more natural for you. In that progression, you're given recognition as to the level of what you've been exposed to until you reach the level of black belt. And people often from the outside look at it and say, wow, black belt means that you are now the master of the craft. In all honesty, in perspective of it, you are not. You are literally the person that just hasn't told that they now understand all the pieces to the craft. The learning really begins at that point, and that is the indoctrination into your natural responses to things and your ability to innately perform the functions and the forms without necessarily having to remember to do it. You learn it by rote. Why do I bring all these examples up? Because in all honesty, the example of earned versus paid versus owned media is very much at the nascent of the beginning of things. It's a basic concept. It's like learning words, as I mentioned in my example of language. You're learning terminology. It's not a strategy. It leads to a strategy. It leads to the capability. And we'll get into that. We're going to actually discuss how to take the knowledge of this categorizations and how does that apply to creating a strategy. But it's not out of date or out of place. We've been using these terms for 10 plus years at least. And longer if you consider from cutting edge usages of it as digital marketing began to progress from its early stages of some little interesting thing to now the dominant force that it represents. So from that, let's talk about the three concepts. Let's define them first, talk about what they are first, and then we can get into exactly what it is that you do with this information. So what is paid media? Well, I'm not going to sound like Captain Obvious, but it is obvious. I'm going to read these definitions as presented. Paid or bought media are media where there is investment to pay for visitors, reach or conversions through search, display ad networks, affiliate marketing, etc. Offline traditional media like print and TV advertising and direct mail remain important, accounting for a large share of paid media spend. I would say yes to no. It's still very expensive mediums, but it is paid media. You're paying to be put in front of somebody. How does that translate to our current environment? Well, that's paid campaigns, paid Google, paid Bing, paid Facebook. These are all paid media. We're paying to get in front of people. They would not see what we have to offer if we hadn't paid to do so, much like a radio or TV ad for those who are more to the traditional perspective. What is earned media then? Traditionally earned media has been the name given to publicly generated in media through PR investment and targeted influencers to increase awareness about a brand. What does this mean? Well, in translation, instead of saying, here's my ad, buy my product, it's here, this person is going to talk about all the cool stuff that I am, and through that audience engagement, I derive benefit of conversions or people wanting to know more about my product and or purchase my product. You're earning it through representation, not by hard selling, not by conversions, not by paid. Doesn't mean you don't pay for it. It means that in many ways, your presence in market and what you do about amplifying that presence in market with PR releases. We're opening a new hotel, or we have a new restaurant, or this is what we're doing differently, or we hired these people, is earned in the sense that people interested in it, who may not have been aware of it, are now aware of it. You've earned their attention. So, owned media. It's not the last of the three categories. Actually, there's ways to fragment these categories, but the third major category, description. This media is owned by the brand. Online includes a company's own website, blogs, mobile apps, social presence on Facebook, as in your organic content that you share on platforms like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, so forth. That is your media. The biggest, most important one to point out to this is your email list. People that you have direct information about to communicate to. And that nuance we're going to explain when we start talking about how to translate these terms, these words, into what they're really used for strategy. Here's my contention of thinking that these three segmentations are a strategy, because unfortunately, what you learn is what you do. A lot of people learn this in basic training. I mean, all things require basic training. We train our teams, we train our military, we train everybody as saying, welcome to the organization. Let us get you through the fundamentals. You may be having a skill set and talent that we brought you in for. That's why we brought you in. But now we need to train you in what we do. Basic training. This is what we do. Here's basic things. This is our definition of this term. This is our definition of this process. This is where we put it on this shelf over here. This is where we store it in that room over there. It's basic training. That's what these terms are. It's a fundamental building block of moving forward. Only referring to these contents and these contexts of things as a strategy is really simplifying to a painful degree, an inefficient degree, a strategy with this. These are the methods of explaining the aspects of content and value towards what you're doing by the strategies that you're spending time on. From that, I would say that when you're looking at approaching projects and you look at it from the objective goal of, well, if these are just terms, what's the strategy? The strategy is first identifying what the goal is. And the goal isn't always, well, we want to make more money. Thank you, Captain Obvious. It's not so much that as it is, what is your methodology for the goal you have in mind? What is the actual, this is what we say was a success for the efforts we've done. Now, obviously, revenue is the ultimate overall goal for businesses. You're always looking to generate revenues. Okay, aka eventually, because of your optimization of how you handle those revenues, top line revenue down to bottom, okay, you're going to create profit. People confuse revenue with profit. Unfortunately, revenue is simply cash flow. This is the top of a funnel for visualization. This is the monies that are coming in from all the things that you're doing. How that trickles through, and we've heard these terms many times before, is how your costs are related for generating that revenue. You have your labor, you have your product costs, you have your overheads, you have all your things. And in hotels, we have many segmentations associated with that, including channel cost, things that cost us to do this stuff. This goes in some ways in the paid medium, okay? But all these things take pieces of that away. For every dollar in, these are incremental cents that get attributed to where it came from and how much did it cost us to generate that dollar. The remaining amount after all of that, through all of that, and we have many acronyms of EBITDAs and so forth to go through, okay, is your net profit. Now, if your goal is total revenue, that is different than net profit. You may think it's total revenue, but really net profit and revenue are different. If you're looking just for total revenues, it may mean that it cost you 99 cents to get that dollar. To your goal, you're successful. You generated that dollar of revenue. If your goal was net profit, you were unsuccessful because you were below what you needed to cover and get the net profit that you wanted for. Companies operate at different profit scales, anything from 3-4% up to 11-14%. Okay, and depending upon the businesses, they can be even much higher. Their actual cost of product is much lower, and their ability to generate profit is much higher. In hotels, that's not necessarily the case. There is a lot of hands out between the time that the dollar walks in the door to the time if money goes into the bank that is actually able to be kept. So from this perspective, even the clarity of what you mean by generating more revenue has an impact on your strategy. Because if you're looking at total revenue, going back to our first example, that means whatever monies I can contribute to just growth of revenue, money's coming in, is a measurement of success. To do so means whatever the cost of the channel is not my concern as long as we're making the revenue from it. Let's break this down into a paid example. If I'm doing a paid ad campaign on Google and I have a budget of $10,000 and it's costing me $3 to $4 per click, then I have a amount of $10,000 to spend to cover the demand, the voice, the actual searchability of the terms that I've defined, the keywords that I've defined, okay? And I have that much money to spend towards it. If I can just show revenue from that I spent $10,000, and even though I may have made, let's just be average and say 2 to 1 as, okay, I spent $10,000 and made $20,000, that's a 50% cost. So before all of my other costs associated with my business get applied to that money that came in the door, half of it was already accounted for just bringing it to the door. So now that $20,000 that I made at a 2 to 1 for what I spent on paid is actually $10,000 that goes into the funnel of what it costs for me to do my business, to provide what it is that I sold through this ad campaign. If you're running at 30% cost for labor, 20% cost for product, 10% cost for fixed overhead, and these are slow, low numbers, okay, then just take that you've taken away that much less of that money before it ever gets to any of the other things, which is your fixed overhead costs and things that are unescapable, the electric bills, the water bills, the lease on the property or the mortgage note on the property, whatever it may be. Then you're adding also brand percentages if you're brand, ownership distributions if you're needing that. So all these nick and cut at it. The point of it is that you have to determine more about the return on investment, the ROI you're looking at. Now we're talking about what's called KPIs, key performance indicators. So you have a goal. Now you have to define the measurement of that goal. How do we get to this goal in a way that we all understand and agree? So I'm going to drink some coffee while we do this. The detriment of being the only one talking today. By the way, for those who are not yet or used to the transition and our format of our show, we started as of this month as a transition point to reduce our show to 1 hour. And for right now, I've taken over the hosting, moderating directly as we assemble co-hosts that we can announce that will be specific to shows going forward and specific to topics. From our feedback from everyone, as much as they enjoyed our open dialogue, they would appreciate to understand, because of everyone's time constraints getting tighter again, what we're going to be talking about. And if so, then they can make it a priority, or if they already feel comfortable in the topic, they don't need to, or if they really love the person who's going to be talking about it, they're going to make it a point to be there. So we've changed to this format to lessen the demand on my co-host that I used to have for the show. I've decided to just take the lead for the next couple of weeks, going through some of the topics that I find relevant, specific to task, and that's where we are right now. So thank you for that slight diversion to it. So going back to KPIs and goals, KPI is a measurement. How, now that we have this goal, what is the measurements that are going to guide us in that path to getting there? Think of it as a path on top to go to the top of the mountain. We want to know where we go. That's our goal. How we get there, through the woods, around the river, over the river, through the canyon, whatever. How we get there is a measurement of what we need to do to get there. Now this turns into an interesting thing that is replacing our terms of paid versus earned versus owned. It's not to discount those terms. It's to say that that is a fundamental, rudimentary, basic idea of categorization of values and content. Because for those people that decide where monies are to be spent, it's a means to explain to them the value proposition that those represent, but it is not a means of getting to the ends that they want. That's strategy. And that also means that we have to have a certain vernacular, which is the KPIs. Let me give you a prime first-person example of the differences between verbiage of one department versus another. And this goes from a conversation I've had many times for many years. We've been the vanguard, myself, Bonnie Buckheiser with Buckheiser, her own company. We talk about convergence. And prior to COVID pandemic, it was a growing popularity, but not an assimilated process. COVID has accelerated that, as with many things, exponentially, where it's a mandative process where the person with sales is now doing marketing and revenue, or revenue doing marketing and sales, whatever. So this convergence of things had to happen. As a marketer, I could refer to ROAS. For those maybe unfamiliar with the term, that's a return on ad spend. Now, that is measured by how much did I spend versus how much did I earn for that particular ad. Okay, if I spend 100 and I made 500, good news, maybe. If that's our benchmark, is that above or below our benchmark? That's a predetermined KPI. But let's say, for instance, I did a 20-to-1 ROAS, meaning for every dollar I spent, I got $20 back for it. From any measurement of perspective, that's a solid, positive, good thing. That's great. I spend $1, you give me $20 back. Here's more dollars. That's the thing. If I did a 20-to-1 ROAS, but I only produced $5,000 for it because I sold the cheapest product we had at the easiest time that it was most demand, then I, as a marketer, are quite happy with my choice. I succeeded in my mission. My metric of my KPI of ROAS was overachieved. But the revenue manager, who's concerned with a different metric, and that is total revenue, is looking, well, you only gave me $5,000. I needed for this month an additional $100,000. So I'm $95,000 still short. And marketing is the tip of the spear. That's the one that gets what we're doing in front of the people that need it. The communication, the awareness, all that paid, earned conversation we're having. That's what marketers do. Okay. They put this in front of the people that are most likely to be interested in the product at the most likely time that they're wanting the product, so that they're most likely to buy the product. Well, I fell short $95,000. So it wasn't a success, but I'm in my department getting my bonus check because I hit the goal that was assigned to me. Overall, I didn't hit a goal that was really valuable to the entire operation. So having these KPIs common to each other, that convergence of dialogue where they're all agreed to as understood by each of the departments, is a key component to this process that's related to strategy, not terminology. And that's the point I'm trying to make out of today's discussion. Terminology is paid media, earned media, owned media, and that's great. You need to understand those building blocks. Just like in learning a language, you need to understand the difference between blue, red, green as colors by the English language. It's not that it's not important to understand the meaning of those. But to say that now that you understand those means that you now can do strategy to marketing, it's a first step in doing it. It's not an true understanding. It's like my martial arts example. Just because I showed you how to punch and break a board early on doesn't mean you're the master of martial arts and that you can do things. You know, what you can do is break a board. Congratulations. That's a great first step in understanding power and control and focus. But it's not learning the art. That's where we get into more strategy discussions. So we have goal conversations. This is our goal. First, it has to be understood by all the departments that are participating in that goal. If you want to be contrite about saying, well, more revenue, okay, let's take that and say, we need more revenue. Okay, let's define that between, as we discussed, net profit versus gross revenue. We need more gross revenue. So we're in an active growth campaign at this point. It's not about refinement of the monies we're making, meaning better ADR, less occupancy, which gives us more revenue with less demand on our product. Another discussion, another day. But now it's just how much money can we put into the coffers on the top of the pile that we then know that it's going to cost us whatever it's going to cost us to do that, so that we have more revenue to work with. We need cash flow. That's a focus point of this. So you have that goal, gross revenue. We're looking for top line revenue. How much revenue can we bring in? Okay, great. Now let's bring it down to the departments that are going to be facilitating that. We have marketing, we have revenue management, we have sales. Let's not forget, as we discussed before, operations, accounting, and HR. Why are they important? Operations is fulfillment. They have to do whatever it is that we're selling. If we're offering a package or value proposition or whatever, front desk team needs to be aware of that so that they don't. Worst kiss of death of any promotion is the front desk agent that says, I don't know what you're coming in package wise. Why am I supposed to give you a bottle of water? I don't know what you're talking about. Bad thing. Accounting needs to know it, because as they pay bills and invoices, are they responsible for filtering out maybe some overlaps on people that are sending them bills that are doing the same credit to their funnel that they're providing for, and saying, well, no, that was my guest I sent you. And the other person saying, no, that's my guest I sent you. But you end up paying both because you didn't tell accounting that we need to wash out, and who do we prioritize? Was this because of their effort or these effort? As we often say, and Stuart Butler, my previous co-host, used to have, attribution theft is real. And it can be happening. And unfortunately, a lot of companies overpay some of their vendors that are providing services for them based on the channels they represent, because they're both taking credit for the same piece of business. And accounting doesn't know different, and they're not told differently, and they end up paying more money than they need to. A dilution of the total bottom line revenue that we're talking about. And then, of course, HR. Why is HR involved? Without the proper team members, they don't have the skills necessary to be that good at what they do. not just from the frontline operations, but for the people that are involved with the actual generation of revenue. If they're not told what exactly is needed of the marketer that they need to hire to fill that role, so that the revenue manager who has been doing it through COVID no longer has to do it, but they didn't get explained exactly what that skill set is, that person may be a fish out of water, so to speak, and they may not have the skills necessary to do the best at what they need for what they were hired for. And as we know right now, labor is a huge issue in many, many ways. And finding skilled people is even harder. And finding multi-skilled people is even it's like a unicorn, as we used to say. It's the rarest of the rare, hard to find somebody that, I can do revenue management. I can do marketing. I can handle sales. Really hard. And if you have somebody like that, you need to be keeping up with them and doing what you can to maintain them. So anyway, going to this process of awareness to all the departments then creates that the goal is understood by everybody. Great. This is our top line revenue goal we're going to do. Now, how are we going to measure what we're doing towards it? Well, first off, that ROAS example I gave of marketing has to be either understood by everybody else or ignored by everybody, including the department that it's most relevant to. It's a measuring stick of metric for marketing to know whether or not it's being effective in their campaigns, but it is not a measurement to the goal. Big difference. Often people confused by the fact that they have data and they have relevancy of what that data is for what it was being used for. And they feel because of that, they have a handle on what it's doing for them. But it has no objective goal to the common goal KPI that everyone has agreed to. I have to measure my ad campaigns in marketing on their effectiveness. I thought from my research, we're going to have 100,000 people based on the keywords I've put together for a campaign. 100,000 people search these keywords for this particular time frame that I'm marketing for. I need to get around, from my calculations, around a 35 to 40% share of voice, meaning I need to show up for 35 to 40% of these people in order to generate the number of metrics, the number of people seeing my ads, so that at a 3% conversion, based on the history of what these keywords would represent, I would generate enough people to come to my website, to see my product, to actually purchase it, to make the revenue threshold I need to measure against the metric of the ROI that we're calculating, the KPI of what we're trying to do. See how that worked? It's like, look, you look at what you're looking for to come through. Now, for my measurements, ROAS is a key element. It is not, however, a key element to the overall goal that we have all agreed to, which is total revenue. Mine, that's a temperament. That's like a temperature to an engine to a race car. Okay. I don't want it to get too hot, and I certainly don't want to go over and get it too low because it's not really running. There's something wrong if it's too low, too hot. So that measurement of the temperature of the engine of the race car is the element to make sure the car is still on the track, but it's not the end goal, which is winning the race. It's a part of it. So as a mechanic, I'm worried about that. The driver just needs to let me know what's going on. That's the difference. That's why we're getting into this difference between when we keep talking about paid versus earned versus owned media. Those are terms in relationship to the context of what we're generating and the purpose of what we're doing. Always being able to go over and to cultivate owned media is good. Using owned media is great. But the person that writes the checks for the things that generate business, it's great that they understand the difference between what these are. But at the end of the day, the goal is that the place makes money in the way that they needed to make money for the purposes what they're wanting to make it for. So walking in and saying, we're going to talk about how we're going to do this for earned media. Great. At the end of that dialogue, you're going to tell me why I needed to listen to all the stuff prior to it, is what I'm trying to say. So going to our gold example with our KPIs. Common goal, common understood the goal. This is the goal. Revenue, gross revenue. We need $100,000 more than what we have forecasted for right now, or historically have done before for this period of time. So that's the goal, top line revenue, which means we have a broader spectrum of what we consider acceptable return on investment. We would tolerate a lower return on investment simply for the revenue it would generate. This may be a temporary goal, maybe the mission statement of your company, but let's just take it in context. So now we know we have a larger latitude of ROI. I don't have to walk in and say anything that is less than 10 to 1, I can't do because it would be inefficient for us. We need a 10 to 1 ROI because we're yielding net revenue. Nope, I'm just talking about gross revenue. So I can go down to 4 to 1 and say good, because in all honesty, just math calculations, if I'm taking a 25% cut of what it takes to actually drive the business, knowing that there's at least 80, 95% cost associated with fulfilling the business, I'm not really worried about net revenue, but from a revenue perspective, I at least was able to pay for that 95% cost factor. Cash flow. Okay. So common goal, common KPIs, total revenue. That strategy now goes into each of the departments that are contributing it. How does this break down? Well, we've talked a little bit about marketing. Let's talk about the other departments. Revenue management, channel segmentation, meaning as to whom to where what business is coming from. Knowing that I'm trying to do revenues, it allows me to lower ADR. We know, like a spigot, the less it costs somebody to go over and take our product, our hotel being the example, the more likely they are going to consider us as an option for them. To a certain point, marketing, you can get too cheap and expectations change. And we have had those discussions in the show before. But I know I have a tolerance that I can adjust ADRs to be more aggressive being lesser cost to the consumer, so that it makes their interest in, if they are already coming to my market, that I'm a better consideration because I'm going to save them some coin by staying with me versus my competitor. It also means my occupancy is potentially going to go up, which puts a burden on my costs. Again, not a part of the goal. We're not worried about expanding the cost factor and the net profit, so to speak, because, and this goes to an age-old question, if you had a 100-room hotel, would you prefer at 100% occupancy at $50 or 50% occupancy at $100? And it's not meant to be a rhetorical question, but it almost is. The burden on the product itself, electricity, housekeeping, staff requirements, labor, wear and tear, product usage, is lesser when there's less occupancy and they're paying more to be there with you, compared to having higher occupancy and lesser ADR. You have more people there, but you're making less money from them. So it actually costs you more to have that many more people in there than it is to have lesser people with more money being spent. I know it sounds, for those that are not familiar with thinking like that, it's kind of a natural for most people in the industry. And if I'm being too simple, my apologies, but it is a common factor of understanding how occupancy ADR, the correlation works. But given the scenario that we're discussing, I have latitude with my ADR. I can actually lower my ADR, which is going to increase my occupancy. It's going to put a burden on my cost product. More labor, more product usage, more wear and tear. But that's not our focus right now. Gross revenue is our focus right now. And for that reason, we have that latitude. So now revenue management is going to go over and say, great, with my lower ADR, let me look at my sources of business historical. Geographically is one of the first ones to look at. Where do they come from this time of year that we're trying to drive this business? And see what historically the rate is that we were getting from people from those geographic areas. If I know people from Boston are paying $150 in my example a night, okay, compared to people from Philadelphia that have historically for the same time paid $175, then I know that they're in the game. Now, again, go with my example. If we're looking for net profit, I wouldn't really consider Boston as much. I would go for the higher yield ADR because they're less likely to be convinced to spend up historically to come stay with us compared to people in Philadelphia who are already tolerant of that rate. So that affects the targeting that they're going to talk to marketing about when it comes to ADR. The other is what now is better for us to, is there negotiated rates we have? And that goes talking to salespeople. We'll get to that in a second. But revenue management is looking at saying, okay, look, I have ADR flexibility. So what packages do I have that I have lower ADR and that we can now feature? Because we know they sold if we included breakfast, or we know they sold if we included some amenity. We know they sold if they included some sort of benefit to it. And so now that was a net ADR lesser, but now because that we're willing to do that, is that a good package to offer? So now they create their package strategies. What is it we're offering at what rate for what it is that we have? And so now that rate structure is created for that time period based associated with what the rate tolerance that they have to generate top line revenue. So now there's their conversation. Let's go to sales. If we're going to try to drive business and we're looking at the percentage contribution of group and sales in general, negotiated consortia and wholesalers and everybody else, okay, LNRs, local negotiated rates and so forth. Now, if we're not so worried about the ADRs, we are just general revenue traffic, who can we solicit that says, guess what, Bob? That rate of XYZ that I had given you, we're more than happy to have you come in. I know I told you we didn't do that last month, but now we have it this month, and it's a good chance to pick up that opportunity for you. So it opens the door for sales to reconsider whom they reach out to with that kind of offering because of that latitude that they now have. So that's their mantra for them. The combination between revenue management and sales is how much percentage are they wanting to allow sales to run at that rate, because it will still be even lower than most transient rates that they have. And to say, well, I can give you this much inventory, I can give you this much latitude, these many dates, these particular dates that may have been blocked out as being, no, we want to lean into transient. We're not going to take group business, anything below this threshold. And now might be, we'll take it if you can sell it. There might be free sell for salespeople. That is, hey, I'm open. I can sell these dates and blocks for whatever I can get for them. And that might be something that opens the door for them based on this top line revenue strategy of goal. So then all this gets translated to marketing. Okay, marketing, tip of the spear. I think these geographic areas, because of the rate ability that we have from them historically, are now open targets. Now we can go back in and say, well, what was the demand factor of those markets? Marketing can go in and say, what was it that worked well for us in that market? Were the email people? Were they paid search people? Were they influenced people? Were they how do we get the business from them? Okay, and to discuss the segmentation associated with that, here's some segments to consider. You have your organic, your website, your presence of mind. Okay, now that's owned media. Okay, but you use it for paid media as well. This is where you begin to blur the lines of the terminology. However effective in explaining things isn't really a methodology as it is an explanation. So you have organic, your website, driving people to your website, your direct booking of your website, so to speak. You have PPC, which goes into primarily two major categories of paid social versus paid in general. And that paid general is usually line share Google, some Bing, depending upon your market, because Bing is still a player into this. Then you have, again, your paid social, which is paid advertisement on your Facebooks, your Twitters, your whatever platform is usable by the demographics you're targeting, okay? And you then have organic social, which is also those that are connected to your social program that are aware of your social program or translate because of your paid social an awareness of your organic social where you can expound and add more content and they're organically engaged with you. You have meta search. You have the ability to go over and present yourself in a paid perspective of people looking for rates and dates and capabilities and availability in your market. You have that as a term. You have email, which is your CRM, customer relationship management efforts. These are the things of reaching out to your previous guests that may have stayed during the same time last year or the year before, because given our circumstances, it may not have been a last year thing. Can you reach out to them and offer? You look at the fact that maybe because of the time frame that you're trying to sell, maybe it falls in the window of drive market, where reaching out to a radius of people, which has been very effective this past year, where you're looking at 150-mile, 300-mile radius of people that can take advantage of your offer. Somebody from Washington State might not be able to come to your Florida offer because you're on the offering for next weekend. And lo and behold, that's just too far away, too short a time for them to actually take it as much as they would love to. So being sensitive to that means that you would have different campaigns associated with your customer relationship management efforts. Email, but going back to old terminology, that's owned media. Okay. Then you have other things, display, retargeting. People, because they hit any of these things, now can be retargeted on other mediums and platforms. Some people don't open emails, but by not opening the email, but being associated with their social media, we can retarget them to maybe see the message they weren't willing to see in an email. There's collaboration between the channels as to how you use it. So these are the methodologies. You have referral campaigns, you have referral platforms, things like Google My Business, citation platforms. You have your schema, which is going back to your organic, which goes back to owned media. All these are segments that are related to basically tools of functionality for your marketing program. How best to communicate what we're doing to the people most likely interested in what we're offering. Again, going to the larger perspective of our conversation, our goal is gross revenue in this example. Our KPIs are the measurements towards that success. Revenue contribution, towards total gross revenue. Simplistic, but for this case, effective. How we do that is based on the department's influence on that. As we've gone through revenue management, as we've gone through sales, and we've gone through marketing at this point as to what they're effectively looking at as tools. This is when it begins to get into a strategy component. So everybody puts their chips on the table. This is what I have. This is what you have. This is what I have. Okay, great. What are we going to do? That's the strategy of this. So not to poo-poo on the terms of paid and earned and owned, okay, because they define the basics of understanding of these things, and it's not the sole purpose, the sole thing about it. This is those three terms are really just a piece of many other terms that are used in all of this, as we're discussing as to channel costs, and channel mediums, and so forth. We look at how do these blend together. How does revenue management's rate strategy, package offerings, inventory availabilities, and opening free sales for what they're offering for sales and so forth, and their tolerance for ADRs and occupancies, and what is our current inventory availability, they begin to tell us what thresholds we have. What's the minimum ADR that we can really run to generate revenues? Because anybody can sell a room for $1, so it doesn't work. It's about what is our minimum basement that this is working, that we're not costing ourselves than we are generating revenue. See, there is a line, even though you're simplistically saying gross revenues, you don't want to spend more, okay, than what you actually get money for. You don't want to spend $1.10 to get $1 because that's not generating actual revenue. Even if it just pays for bills, you're actually costing yourself running it. And there are thresholds that we haven't talked in great detail about, but there are thresholds to all of these channels as to their value proposition of effectiveness. This is when operations has a strong influence in the dialogue of these three departments, because operations is the one, and accounting, to be honestly and fair, your controller and what have you, or your corporate accountant or what have you, has an influence on saying, guys, our total operating cost down to EBITDA, earnings before income tax, depreciation, amortization, for those unfamiliar with the term, you can look it up. We can talk about it in another show, is this. That's the threshold up to the point that there's then a slight discretionary as to how those funds after that point get used and distributed based on ownership obligations and what have you. Now you start factoring in all the costs of this business to determine what is the threshold for all of the departments not to go below. We can't go below this because it costs us more than it generates. That's the law of diminished return. Okay. So now with all of us around the table, accounting tells us these thresholds are net pass-through costs and what have you. So now as departments, we say, well, revenue management comes first. We can't sell below this ADR at this level of length of stay or this level of length of stay. This is the ADR threshold, baseline, bottom, basement. Okay. So now sales looks at it in their rationale of their rate offerings and what they have available and determines who they could sell above that rate, but no lower. What would be of segmentations? Small groups, large groups, consortia, relationships, things that they deal with that says we can probably go to this wholesaler and pitch this better rate than what we contracted with them to see if they could sell it for us. I could go and offer this into this consortium medium and say this is an incentive for us for during this period. I can go to this local negotiated contract relationship and say we have an incentive value for you at this rate. That gives them a go fetch. That gives them the ability to go do this. Marketing now says, okay, so that's my rate. Let me back into that number. So if this is where the math starts coming in, if my ADR is X and my length of stay is Y, my total value of conversion is Z. That Z vector, it goes into the calculations of how many people can I target, large volume, like we talked about before, X number of people interested in all the words that I research, all the terms that I research, all the reasons people research, events, business cycle, travel needs, what have you, in all spectrums. What does that total traffic number represent? How many people can I talk to? And that's defined also from our earlier conversation with revenue management as to which markets historically have been contributors at this time of year. And are they the only marketers, or are they just the markets that we've had experience to? But let's just take them as inclusive to this conversation. From that, we develop a large number of total audience. That's a key element for marketing. What's our total audience? From our total audience, we say, well, how much, based on all the words and things that this total audience uses to discover what it is we're offering or could be contributing to offering, how much is the amount average cost per click? Now, remembering a click is based on 1 out of X number of people having seen the ad. Okay. For every 100, if 2 people click on it, that's 2% click-through rate. Okay. 98% of the people saw your ad, didn't do anything with it. So the 2 people are the people you're going to want to talk to next about once they've come. Are you structured correctly to show and identify the value proposition of what brought them there clearly and succinctly, aka landing page, to make them want to purchase? And it's not a 100% effect, okay? To give some semblance of stick in the sand numbers, if you have a 20% click-through of 1,000 people, so that's 200 people that come to your website, and you get a 5% conversion, okay? That's, let's say that 10%, 20 people, 10 people, 10 out of the 1,000 people that initially may have seen your ad, okay? So that 10, okay, turns into, what's the ADR length of stay? ADR is 150, length of stay is 2 days. That's $300 per acquisition, $300. Well, in order to get in front of that 1,000 people, which represents a certain percentage of 10,000 people, okay, you're only getting exposed to 10% of them, I had to have had at $1.50 a click, in order for that to work, for Google to present me to that 10,000 people, I needed to go over and go backwards and say for 1% to show for click-through, a 20% click-through rate for 1% conversion, I need to go over and show for 10% of the people out of the 10,000 people over 30 days. That's an average of X per numbers per day. And at a click-through rate of 20%, then I have to have a total budget of $3,800, $4,000 to show in front of these people sufficiently to get those 10 people to book with me, to make a cost factor of 4 to 1 for what I spent, the dollar I spent, to get 4 times that money back. 4 times the money back means that to get that person to stay at our hotel cost us 25% before all the other costs get attached to it. It's a very high cost. Normal benchmarks are 10 to 1 is a great number. 8 to 1 is a good number. 7 to 1 is a good number. There are thresholds of incrementality to all of this, but it's based again on your total goal. What goal is it? Is it top line revenue, net revenue, acquisition, brand awareness? There's so many fractions to this. Notice we're not talking anymore about paid versus earned versus owned media, because as we talked about with the language increment, it's a fundamental building block of learning a word before you learn a sentence before you learn a phrase before you learn to read before you learn to talk, long before you learn to have fluency to be able to tell a joke. It's very fundamental. It's a means of interpreting the value of dividing out the content you have based on where it came from. That's it. It's not a strategy. It's a categorization. It's like a column head on an Excel sheet. This is this versus this. That's what it is. Strategy is what we just now talked about, the flowing through of how it is you progress to taking the goal, defining what it means to get to that goal as it relates to all the departments then taking that and bringing it together to understand what they're going to do in collaboration with each other, each person's role, to then go back and create the internalization process of, we haven't even got to when it comes to the marketing, what channels are this? And the cost associated with the channels. When we talk about ROI, one channel versus another is literally between night and day. Your direct channel is obviously going to always be the best because you have more of a mitigated control over it. That being said, if you're a branded hotel or you're not running that platform per se, there's still costs associated with it. Even if it's a branded hotel, not only is it the most still affordable cost, but you still have to pay the brand to give you the benefit of using that platform. Their caveat in this whole relationship is the fact that because they're the brand, that inherently, you as you represent them, should drive business to you. Issue is the brands a lot of times tout a much larger percentage contribution to that effect than really translates in dollars of conversion. You can pick any flavor you want, Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, whatever. They say they bring a very high percentage because you are that brand flag flying over your building. People want to stay with you because of that. It's not necessarily untrue. It's true to those that are to it. But we also know there's not a lot of brand loyalty either. I will buy where I think I have the best rate. And if I've had bad experiences with brands or feel like the brand's not focused on me, then I may be less loyal to it. But brand agnostic apathy is rampant. It's been an old statistic for a very long time. People are members of everything. It's not a matter of, I'm only true and blue Hilton. No, I'll stay wherever I think that the product is related to the price that I'm paying for the location's interest that I'm going for. That's it. It's not about, well, there it is. And, then there's the rewards program, the points, so forth. I'm going to go over and cash them in. Well, they've made it very clear that it's owner-centric. We've had that discussion on the live show before where it's to the benefit of the owner in the sense that they have to pay less to get your business and you benefit less for doing it. I digress. That's an old show. But here we are talking about all these terms and the strategies associated with it. As a marketer, I then look at what is the medium, first off, that's most productive for the marketing targets that we're creating. In this case, after talking with revenue management, we have historic geographies. And then we have ways of interpreting who we're going to look at in those geographies that are most likely to be wanting to buy the product we're offering. And that's the demography of it, the personas, as it were. Persona marketing is where you identify the demographic things that are most related to people that you feel would be most interested in what you do. Now, this is still a collaboration with revenue management. Revenue management has your corporate travelers, your transient travelers, and then segmentations all below that. Different variations of all that. Negotiated rates versus non-negotiated, free sales versus open sales. You have your different segmentations as to the type of people you are. That all is the way revenue management understands. What marketing says is personas. Personas being, what is their family status? Do they have children? Children of what age? What time of year depends on what they're traveling because of that. Whether they have children or not is a method of that. Are they business travelers? Business travelers for what? At what strata are they traveling? Are they a sales rep or are they corporate? Do they have the means to control what they're spending, or are they just told what they can spend? These are all flavors that have to go into the messaging, the content. How is it that you create these things? How is it that you put this information together in a way that's presented clearly as if you're speaking to that person? Because you're only going to market and create. The beauty of the platforms that we have in marketing is that these things can be added into the methodology of putting this in front of the right people. Knowing this before in times past didn't help you, because really you still had to broadcast your message. The old adage, half of my marketing works, I just don't know which half, was because you had to just put it on radio. And if I used this example 1,000 times, I've used it once. We all see automotive ads. And when we're not wanting to buy a car, they're the clutter between the show that we're watching. If you're buying a car, it's the thing you pay attention to because you're looking at the variations of what people are offering. The auto dealerships would love to spend less than what they're spending. But the reality of it is they have to spend as much as they do because they never know where in the funnel of process on that medium you are. Are you the person that is interested in buying a car, or are you the person that doesn't need to buy a car? They don't know, but they have to be there, because presence of mind for that is like a little hamster wheel. The minute you stop, the minute the wheel starts slowing down and stopping. So you always have to be present. That goes for radio advertisement and so forth. That's why traditional medium has struggled to fix its combination with the paid medium and digital, because paid medium and digital is, I can better define who sees my message at what time, and what Google calls ZMOT, zero moment of transition, that moment where the information is sufficient for the decision to purchase. And we often, and unfortunately most marketing people and marketing strategies, are about going to that focus point. When is it they're going to buy something? I don't want to talk to them when they're thinking about it. I don't want to talk to them when they don't even know what they want to buy. That's too expensive. There's too many people that don't translate into buying something from me. I'm talking to everybody, and not everybody's interested. That's the rationale. But there's a lot of entities like OTAs and so forth that play in that space. Brands are supposed to play in that space too, to get them initially seasoned into being aware of what you have to offer, so that as they begin to go through the funnel process of discovery, education, awareness, and conversion, okay, you're part of that consistent dialogue. Reality is, it doesn't work in a linear program. That's the flaw of funnels. It doesn't work from here to there. It works from here to, oh, I just bought something on Amazon. Oh yeah, let me go back to what I was doing. It's very global. So being aware at the moment and talking in context to what they're interested in is a fundamental of this marketing strategy. Going back to our earliest example, because I'm tangent based and I just went off on a tangent, is how do I go to being in front of these people? Which medium? And that goes back to historical data. These markets that I'm aware of, demographically, what's their family status, their income status required for what we're pricing? Obviously, if we're charging $500 a night for a room, certain incomes are not going to be able to afford that. And other than aspirational purchase, they're unlikely to be the ones that we're most interested in talking to. If it's family related, but the resort or the hotel is not related to an event that is family centric, it's a little redundant to try to think we're going to sell to them as well. If it's a method of them not being able to get to it because it's an immediate offer versus a long-term offer, like it's 2 months down the road so people can plan for it, then it's less likely we're going to have to talk to those people as well. These all create criteria that create campaigns. Because when we decide what these personas are, and there's multiplicities to that, but the personas are, then we determine what is the terms that are most likely that they use. We know from gender-based perspective or age categorization, we all use different terms. I'm not a cray-cray user or a, whatever the new late ways of saying things are. I'm not that person. So putting that into the context of the dialogue is not going to get my attention. However, if you speak to me at the medium that I'm interested in, the songs that I relate to, the age in life that I relate to, the perceptions I relate to, I'm probably going to resonate more with your messaging than something that is, we all look at them. Some commercials we look at and go, they're not talking to me. that's I don't flip skateboards over my head anymore and all that stuff. So, whatever the message was, I missed it. Knowing the specifics of who you're targeting is critical to knowing the success that's going to come from it. Measuring KPI, how we're measuring that component to that. So for that reason, once we define who we're trying to get business to, where they're from, and how they resonate with what we have to offer, that's when the content and the messaging comes through. That's when marketers and revenue management and sales and everything collaborate on, well, what content are we going to put on the things that we control? If you own and control your own website, landing pages are critical. You need that affirmation. Ads and paid campaign, going back to an old term, paid media, okay, is related to the content of just action. It's a big red button. Here's enough information to make you want to find out more information. That's what it's for. Platforms like MetaSearch are related to, you're looking for this. You're looking for hotels, and now you're relating to hotel availability and rates. Here's a function that supplies that information for you. Click here to find out what we are offering in comparison to what everybody else is offering for those criteria. MetaSearch is very powerful for that. So knowing which medium is best presented to make that conversion, in our case example here, gross revenue, is a key element to this process. So here we have defining what our goals and channels are. The cost associated with the channels is the next thing. That channel may be productive, but now it has to go through the filter of what we're doing for the campaign, our KPI, which is, that's a very expensive channel. However, our goal is gross revenue. So even though it's expensive, it is going towards the goal, which is it's generating top line revenue. So our threshold of tolerance of the cost of the channel is much lower to accept it, because it's doing what we want to do, which we've been agreed to do as a common goal, which is divine gross revenue. If it was inversed, where it's like we're looking for net revenue, that channel would not be considered. It's too expensive. Well, how does that get defined? Too expensive, not expensive. ROI. How does ROI get defined? What is it that we're targeting that channel provides? And how much does it cost for us to target that at the volume we'd have to spend to derive the volume of engagement from it, at the cost that does for us to generate the revenue we need from it? It sounds like a complex math formula, but it's very straightforward. Dinky, 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 dink. At that point, you have a number. That number is good or it's bad based on your goal. If we worked in silos, as we have done historically, I, as a marketer, would do that channel with the beating of my chest. My ROAS was fine. What's your problem? Well, it didn't generate enough revenue because it cost us too freaking much. Oh, well, that's your problem, not mine. That's how we used to do that. That's unfortunately how a lot of people still do that. The reality is that has to go away. And for some people, it was a forced entry of, you know what, you're right. We got to do this right now. We got to make this all work together. Revenue management marketing has to be like that. Sales has to be like that. It all has to integrate together. So in our example, as a bit of a recap, because we're getting close to this time, common goal definement to all the departments engaged, common KPIs associated with that common goal, defined by each department's ability to perform under those guidelines, what they need to do with the information that they need and can provide to each of the other departments that are intertwined with this. We used to call it convergence, the simulation of all these departments. Some people call it commerce. We're going to get a director of commerce. Commerce means that they orchestrate over all of the people that are in the individual professional disciplines of marketing versus revenue versus sales, what have you. That's fine. It's a great strategy. Reality of it is that those that write the checks and spend the money and own the things, they want to know simply, where are we for what I want out of this? This is what my money's invested into. This is what I want. For hoteliers, it's how well does that work for us to provide the services that we're wanting to provide for the industry that we run in. Either way, those are goals and KPIs. Either way, that is not thinking that a strategy exists by simply understanding the segmentation between paid media, earned media, and owned media. I'm not poo-pooing on the terms. They're basic building blocks of understanding. They're great for basic training. Like, hey, welcome to our world. This is how we define things. This is how we segment this information. This is how we determine what is this versus that. It's all valuable to do so. But please understand, this is down here compared to where you need to be in strategy. This is an awareness of, oh, so that's what that word means. Cerveza's beer. Wow, I didn't know that in Spanish. That's it. Doesn't mean you know Spanish. It just means you know that word is this thing over here. That's what these terms really represent, is they're just an awareness of how they can be defined as you progress to learning what to do with them. And when you learn more what you can do with what those things represent, that begins you the basis of strategy. Strategy creates process. Process can go with proper goals and KPIs, creates results. So always in dialogue with these things. It's not about going into a meeting with those people that are deciding how to spend money and saying, well, our paid media program versus our own media program is not going to go anywhere. It has to go, this is the goal. You want more gross revenue or you want more net revenue, or you want more brand awareness, or you want more development of first person, in this case, owned media. Okay. These are our goal sets. That's our goal. We want more people to sign up to our membership program. Okay. Is that a ROI based decision, or is that a numbers of subscribers? Is it just however it takes for us to get 1,000 people? Because that's a KPI now. It's not just we want more membership. Great. Define that. What is that? Well, that's X number more. Okay. X number is now the goal. How do we measure that? Is it just the number itself or the cost to develop that number? That's KPI. Okay. It's a cost to develop a number. Great. That's a threshold. Okay. If that's the case, what is the methodology? Well, we need to market to X. Okay. That's a department. Well, how is that going to get measured to what we're offering? Ooh, that's revenue management. Is there a way to go over and assimilate that to what we're doing in other facets, like channels like consortia and hosts? Ooh, that's sales. Well, what happens when we fulfill it? Ooh, that's operations. Well, when we build this kind of stuff for the people we're going to be working with, how do we segment how it's costed? Ooh, that's accounting. Well, before we all do this, we don't have certain roles that are filled in. We need certain people that can do X, Y, Z. Ooh, that's HR. But all of that is one team. And that one team is a key component to creating that whole process. So although it sounds like I'm poo-pooing on the terminology, I certainly applaud knowing what they are, and I certainly applaud those that teach it. But it is not where you run out and say, now that I know this stuff, I can do this. It's like the martial arts story. Just because you started karate class, okay, and you have a gi and you're there and you learn how to break a board does not mean you are a martial arts master. You are now, I know karate, for lack of a better term for styles and so forth. It means you know how to break a board because you guys shown that. It's a process to an end. It's a means to that. And that's the key element to that. So with that, we're at our hour. I thank you very much. Dean, thank you for popping in on the speaker side of things. I didn't know if you wanted to join for it, but I got into this. This is our plan and our pattern and our topic, so I stayed with it. Thanks for popping in with that. I certainly do appreciate that. Dean, by all means, will probably end up having one of the shows coming up in the future as well. His forte, of course, is meta search. For those that do not know, he's Basecamp meta search marketing, co-host of many times with us, and excellent person when it comes to that topic and dialogue, and does training associated with meta search as well. So with that in mind, thank you all for your time and attention today. Thank you, everyone. And also thank you for everyone's feedback from times before. It was wonderful to go over and hear from people. They enjoyed the change in format. Thank you to all of you, many of the platforms. As a reminder to everyone, we are, and as always, simulcasted on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, many channels, many places. We also recast the show on Wednesdays, 11:30 a.m. Sydney time for those in the APAC region, and 11:30 a.m. London time for those in the EU region, even though we live cast on them. And it is truly amazing that I get people at what I would consider very odd times in their own time zones, reaching out and dialoguing with us in text and chat. And I sincerely appreciate all that. And as a reminder to everyone, this is always live casted on our TV channel. And I mean channel in the sincerest sense, on Roku, Apple TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Google Play, which is Google TV, and Amazon Prime or Fire Stick, whatever you look at. Plus, it's also an iOS. And then just look for Hospitality Channel. Also, this is now in our new archive. It will always stay in our old archive. We'll always keep this updated. The old archive is hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. There will always keep the archive of all the old shows with transcripts and all that stuff. But the new home is hospitalitychannel.tv. That is our online TV channel, which is a linear channel, meaning this is on at 2, this is on at 4, and what have you. So right now the shows are rolling through each week. But by the same token, they will be, as we get better at defining and tagging all of our old shows, because it's a new medium. We didn't do this back then. So now we're going backwards and going through all the old shows and say, oh, this is this co-host, tag it for that co-host. That's this topic. Let's tag it for this topic. Eventually, it's going to get much more robust where you can search by topic and or by presenter, which we've had wonderful co-hosts and guest hosts over the past 8 years that we've been doing this. Well, we're actually in our 8th year. So the past 7 years that we've been doing this every week. Massive amounts of content. Didn't realize how much content we had until I started trying to segment it. But it's all there. But if you want to see the TV or sign up, like I said, on Roku or whatever have you, you can go to talktravel.tv. There it shows you what it looks like on the channels, but you can also, if you go to your Roku, Google TV, Apple TV, and or Amazon Prime TV, Fire Stick, just look for Hospitality Channel, sign up. The free side will always be the broadcasting. The paid side, which is $4.99 a month, is going to be the development of more and more content. It's the only TV channel dedicated to hospitality. We're not there to do a diners and drive-ins and dive food TV, food channel, whatever. We're here for the industry. We're here to go over and share and represent all the things that make this industry an amazing industry and truly a joy to be in. As stressful as it can be and as pressurous as it is an amazing reward system for all those that can appreciate the feeling of attaining a great banquet or providing great service to somebody stayed at your resort or great meal experience. That warm feeling of satisfaction that gives from providing service like that is addictive. You thoroughly enjoy it. So that's the purpose of the TV channel, is to bring that back to people's understanding of how much fun it is to be in this industry and all the things. If you want to learn more about it, plus also if you have products that are selling to the industry, it gives them you a medium to, like a TV channel, show what it is that you do. So enough with that. That is our hour. Thank you so very much. My name is Loren Gray. Thank you again for the privilege of your time, and I look forward to seeing everyone next week. Bye, everyone.